My name is Dusty Devers, and I'm one of the pastors of the Christ-Centered Churches Network, and we are introducing you to some of the guys who will be preaching the sermons at our conference on September 20th and 21st. It's our fourth year of having this conference, and the conference topic this year is the necessity of new birth, of regeneration. So we're going to introduce each other, or introduce ourselves, and then we'll get onto the topic with George Mays. Josh, you want to start us?
Josh King, Meridian Church.
George Mays, Christ Fellowship in Lawton.
Jay Jones, Christ Fellowship, Lawton.
Billy Elkins, Trinity Baptist Church in Chickasha.
Yeah. And I'm, again, Dusty Devers, and I'm one of the pastors at Grace Community Church of Elgin. George, you're preaching from Ezekiel 37 and the Valley of the Dry Bones. Let's just start with a kind of a general question. What is the new birth?
I mean, the new birth is bringing new life out of death. It's something that, like we talked about with Jay, it's a necessity. You must be born again. You must be regenerated. And that's what the picture is here in Ezekiel 37. It's, if you don't know what it is by the time you get done with Ezekiel 37, you're just not seeing the picture that's being painted for us.
Yeah, so since you bring it up, a lot of people know Ezekiel's vision of the Valley of the Dry Bones, but some people don't. It'll be good to refresh our memories. Do you mind telling us the story?
Yeah, I mean, most people, they know Ezekiel cried them dry bones, right? That's how you learned how all your bones fit together in your skeleton, right? Am I losing everybody here? So the story is Ezekiel is in Babylon. Israel has fallen to the Babylonians. They've gone into exile because of their sin. Ezekiel is prophesying. He's prophesied both judgment and salvation. And in Ezekiel 36, we have God promising a new covenant to his people, that he's going to bring them back. He's going to forgive them of their sins. He's going to get rid of their idolatry, and they will be his people, and he will be their God. But the question is, how is this going to happen? Because as we look through the rest of the Old Testament, even when Israel comes out of Babylon, they still carry the idols with them in their heart. So the question isn't, how do you get the people out of Babylon? How do you get the Babylon out of the people? By the time you get to the end of the Old Testament, it looks like Israel's going to go into exile again. Ezekiel 37 is the answer. How is God going to save his people? So he puts Ezekiel down in this valley, and it is filled with bones. All of these just dry bones. It's just this graveyard. And God asks Ezekiel, can these bones live? That's a interesting question. You're set down in this graveyard, be like going to a graveyard and saying, well, can these people come out of these graves? And Ezekiel says, God, you know. And so he tells him to prophesy over these bones and prophesy that they'll stand up and that they'll have breath put into them. So he does it, and that's what happens. This wind blows, it raises these bones, puts a spirit into them. God tells him to prophesy again, to put flesh on them, and they're covered with flesh. And here in this valley where there were nothing but bones of dead men, now there's standing this army of living, breathing people.
So you're situated between Jay's sermon on the necessity of the new birth and Josh's sermon on the effectual calling. Why did you choose this text, and how are you situated there in the middle of those two?
Yeah, I chose this one at first because I like it. This is a passage that it's always been fascinating to me, and I've always wanted to preach it. And so I think that this is kind of the bridge between Jay's sermon and Josh's sermon, and it's painting a picture for us. So in the teaching of Jesus in John chapter 3 and the teaching of Peter in 1 Peter, here we have this picture so we can have this kind of visualization of what the teaching is. So you've got the necessity of the new birth. Why do you need to be born again? It's because we're dead. You don't get any deader than this, right? This is not the picture of someone who is seeking after God. It's not someone who, well, God's done 99% of the work and you do the last 1%. You're drowning, but your hand is sticking up above the water, right? it grabbed the life preserver. No, these bones. I think it's humorous that these are not just bones; they're dry. And Ezekiel goes ahead and he says they're very dry, as in case you didn't get it.
Right.
You're not, the Princess Bride. He's just mostly dead.
Yeah.
You're all the way dead. You are. This is you. So why do you need to be born again? Well, if not, you're dead. You're hopeless.
But there's not any intermediate prevenient grace
There's
to
no
get you to
prevenient
mostly
grace.
dead
That's right.
first?
Yeah, there's nothing. There's no. Well, you just God gives you just a little push, and then you pick yourself up. Right.
The ants are in the ground planting DNA on the bones.
Right. That's right. So
Getting
this
the right sludge.
This is one-sided. Right. Dead people don't pick themselves up and walk around. Dry bones don't fit together and have the sinews and the muscles and the skin put back on them, let alone the spirit put back in them, so that they're not, these zombies. They are actual living people. And so I think what's so fantastic is in verse 4 that God tells him to prophesy over these bones and say to them, "O dry bones, hear the word of the Lord." What's the method? What's the means by which life comes in? It's the word of God.
Well, how are dry bones going to hear?
Well, again, that's the Spirit is the one who gives the life to these bones. So here comes the debate: what comes first? Regeneration or faith?
Right.
Well, I think
Yeah.
when you look at this, it's regeneration, right? These bones, they come to life, and it's all one-sided. These bones are not. I see that hand, right?
So you're not a Pelagian or a semi-Pelagian.
Right, right. This is monergism. This is one-sided. Salvation belongs to the Lord. It comes through the Word of God, and when He prophesies, here comes the breath of God. The Spirit comes and sets these bones on their feet.
And that becomes particularly powerful when that's exactly what Jesus is referencing there in John 3.
Yeah.
And then a few verses down, of course, you have the John 3:16 conferences that completely flip that on its head. They don't take it within that context.
Yeah, so Jesus says that you must be born again, and unless someone is born of the water and the Spirit, which I think is referencing Ezekiel 36, where he says that I'll wash you with clean water and put my Spirit in you. And then he says, just as the wind blows and you don't know where it comes from or where it's going, so are those who are born again or born of the Spirit. I think he's referencing Ezekiel 37. Where's this wind come from? Yeah. Well, it comes from God. Right. Did these bones have anything to do with it? No, they're just laying there in a pile. And so we've got the necessity, and then we have the effect of it. So the Spirit blows and sets these bones up, and none of them are saying no. Right.
So does it leave those bones anything about which to boast?
I don't think so. I don't.
Boast in the Lord.
I mean,
That's it.
these bones,
Right.
they stand up, and they're living creatures, and this is the picture of God. I think first bringing Israel out of exile and bringing them back into the land, but like I said, even when they come back into the land, they're still spiritually dead. There's still something else that has to happen, and so this is regeneration. This is in a very vivid, unforgettable way. You're seeing dead people come to life, and that's exactly what Jesus talks about. That's what the apostles talk about. It's here in the Old Testament. Jesus didn't come and start teaching something that was brand new. This is something that Nicodemus should have known. And that's what Jesus says, right? Aren't you the teacher of Israel and you don't know what I'm talking about? It's right here. He should have known.
Yeah, it's probably why after he raises Lazarus, they have a fervent urgency to not only kill Jesus, but to kill Lazarus too.
Right.
Because it's almost like he's performing Ezekiel 37.
That's right.
For everyone to see.
Yeah.
And they know we've got to do something now.
Right.
So you've talked about this some. What's the relationship of Ezekiel 37 with Ezekiel 36? Ezekiel 36 is this Ezekiel prophesying about the new covenant,
Right.
that God's going to give them a new heart and a new spirit he will put within them. What's the relationship of those two chapters? If we're going to think contextually, what do you see there?
Yeah, I mean, he says, I will take you from the nations and gather you from all the countries and bring you into your own land. I will sprinkle clean water on you, and you shall be clean from all your cleannesses, and from all your idols I will cleanse you, and I will give you a new heart, and a new spirit I will put within you, and I will remove the heart of stone from your flesh and give you a heart of flesh. I will put my spirit within you and cause you to walk in my statutes and be careful to obey my rules. How is this going to happen? This is the new covenant. This is the promise that God gives to his people. The old covenant is ineffective, not because the law is weak, but because the people are sinners. The problem, as the writer of Hebrews says, is the problem's with them. They don't have a heart that is wanting to follow the law of God and walk in obedience to his statutes. So God has to do something for them, and that's the new covenant. He's going to take that heart of stone out of them, this heart that is unwilling and unable to follow God. And he's going to put a new heart in them. And in the language of Jeremiah 31, another new covenant passage, he's going to write the law on their hearts. So we see that here's the promise. That's the teaching. 37 is the picture. Let's put them together, and we have the whole image before us. God is going to take these previously dead, unable, unwilling people to follow his law, and he's going to raise them to spiritual life, and it's going to happen. This is not a maybe. It's not the Spirit's going to blow and you know, whoever walks the aisle is going to have this happen. This is effectual. This is irresistible. These bones are going to stand up, and everything that Ezekiel prophesies is going to happen. Which, that's the good news, right? It's not left up to us. Yeah. It's God in his power, in his sovereignty. He saves sinners who can't save themselves, who can't raise themselves to life.
So do you want to say something?
I was just going to say, I think Jesus, he reiterates and makes this one-sidedness very clear.
Right.
And has the audacity to make a statement that the Son gives life to whom he will.
Right.
It's totally one-sided. There's no room for any human boasting. And Josh, I'm looking forward to hearing what he has to say about how it's effectual. You know, Jesus doesn't try and fail.
Right.
He gives life to whom he will. Mm-hmm. It's very clear.
Yeah. And this all comes through the work of Christ. It's through Christ's perfect obedience, his sacrificial death on behalf of his people, his resurrection and ascension. He sends the Spirit. And now everyone who calls upon the name of the Lord will be saved. He gives the Spirit to his people. And that's all here. It's all here. It's when Jesus chastised the disciples for not knowing about the work of the Messiah and regeneration. It's because it's here. It's laid out for us in the text for those who have eyes to see. Right.
It goes all the way back to Deuteronomy 30, that he'll remove the foreskin of the heart.
Right.
so that they may keep his law.
Yeah.
But if we unhitch the Old Testament, we'll never see it, right?
That's right.
Well, that gets into a whole nother can of worms, now, doesn't
throw
it?
that out, but yeah.
That's
as
another
though
conference.
the necessity of regeneration should impact how we do ministry.
Right.
So, George, thank you. There's a lot more to be said. We'll have more conversation about it. If you want to hear more, there'll be other videos posted. But for now, you can go to www.christ-centered.church. You'll see more videos there. You can register for the conference September 20th and 21st. Early bird is $10. Otherwise, the registration is $15. You'll get, 4 books, 3 books, 4 books, and a lunch. A lot of fellowship, a lot of good time together, and hopefully a lot of great teaching that stirs our hearts to worship the Lord and give Him and Him alone praise for what He has done to save us. Just a reminder that if you know folks, or you've been sharing the gospel with folks, been praying with people, we have free registration for anyone who is not a believer, who hasn't yet put their faith on Christ. And just let us know. Go on the website, look at our email address is there, email us, and we'll comp their registration, because we want them to come and hear the good news about Christ and be saved by God's miraculous work.